Hey everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week my first question comes from Alan Titan, who says, I just started uploading videos back in May, June, and I haven't said in my videos that I'm an atheist. I haven't even told my aunt, who I think is super religious, and I'm worried that telling my whole 26 subs find out, they'll unsubscribe. Question, should I bring it up in my videos that I'm an atheist? And should I bring it up with my aunt during one of the many times when she brings up religion? For me, the answer to your first question is easy. Should you mention that you're an atheist in your YouTube videos? Yes. If you have a reason to, if you want to. I mean, I don't feel like you have a duty to disclose it. If you make YouTube videos about stuff and atheism isn't a relevant topic, then you don't need to mention it and you don't need to feel like you're hiding anything from anybody. But if it comes up and if it's relevant, or if there's something you want to talk about that would involve you saying you're an atheist or offering your perspective on something as an atheist, then of course you should. You should make the videos that you want to make about the things you want to make them about. As for your aunt or aunt, I can never quite decide how I should pronounce that word. As for your aunt, let's go with that. That very much depends on the situation and on who your aunt is. You say that she is very religious. There are some very religious people I know who are also capable of having civil, intelligent discussions with atheists. I mean, just because someone is super religious doesn't mean that they are bigoted or hostile toward atheists. But if that is the case with your aunt, if she is someone who is not only super religious but is also very suspicious or very hostile toward non-religious folks or folks outside of her particular religion in general, and if she's someone you have to see a lot or someone who you're involved with a lot in your family, maybe it would be better not to say anything. But again, be yourself. Life is too short not to be yourself. If you have something to say to your aunt on a religious question that involves you coming out to her as an atheist, and you're willing to take whatever the consequences are of that in your relationship with your aunt or your family, you should do it. I mean, don't do it if it's going to ruin your life, but if it's going to trigger consequences that you think you can handle, then do it. Man, life is too short to not be yourself. Say what's on your mind. If you have something to say and you think it's important and you think that people ought to hear it, then say it. You know, be yourself. Tina Foucher, in your last Q&A, you mentioned that you watch the ads on your favorite YouTubers' videos. Is there a limit to that, though? My YouTube watching has recently been plagued with ads from the Christian Heritage Party, and even though I love you, Steve, there's no way I'm putting up with watching that shit. And since I brought up Canadian politics, have you been following our election at all? I find it's easy for a person on the internet to have a decent idea of what's going on in the US, but do you Americans have any interest in our upcoming election? Thanks. And another viewer, Jonathan Coit, also asked if I follow politics in other countries. There is a limit. My limit on ads isn't so much content, because if an ad comes up with content that I don't find interesting or I find offensive, but it's on someone's channel that I want to support, I can just mute it, you know, or do something in another window until the ad is done playing. But it's length. If an ad starts playing on a video that's longer than the actual video, which I know happens on my stuff sometimes too, and I have no control over that. I wish there was like a switch I could flip to say, you know, don't play 20-minute commercials in front of my 5-minute videos. But if it's too long, I will skip it or do something else. You know, and sometimes I feel bad about it, but it's not exactly my fault. I mean, I can't blame anybody for not being willing to sit through a 20-minute ad to get to a YouTube video. As for Canadian politics, I'll be honest, I don't really follow them. I feel like an ugly American when I say that. I feel like, and Adi agrees. I feel like, you know, America has such a big footprint and is constantly taking up room in other people's cultures. I mean, I have friends through the internet in Europe who talk to me about our American election and are just as up on it and just as educated on it as we are. And I cannot say the same for their politics. I have not been following the Canadian election. I had a very dim awareness of the UK general election most recently. So no, and I feel like a dick when I say that. But that's the truth. I don't really, I know, it's upsetting, isn't it? I don't really follow politics from other countries, which I guess makes me a typical American. The world revolves around us. The world starts here and it ends at our borders. But if that's true, where are all the immigrants coming from? Conference report. Steve, how do you rate YouTube as a platform for delivering educational experiences? I'm not talking so much about the open courseware materials provided by universities and other established institutions, but rather the possibilities of peer-to-peer pedagogy. I've tracked quite a few channels over the years which seemed to be trying something like that, but many have disappeared and others have deteriorated into purely entertainment or worse. What do you think makes a good education channel? I think YouTube's potential as an educational platform is essentially unlimited. I think a lot of it just comes down to the people creating the content. I think you hit on something key when you said that many of the channels that started out as trying to be education-based have moved into more purely entertainment type stuff. I do think there has to be an element of entertainment involved if you want to have a creative educational YouTube channel. That will be distinguished from, like you said, a university just putting its courses online for free, so you can just watch a video of a lecture. That kind of stuff is great, by the way. That kind of stuff is incredible to give people outside of the university setting access to that material. But if you want to have a YouTube channel that will create a footprint that will attract a large audience, and it's going to be education content, and I do think it needs to have a little bit of snap, it needs to have a little bit of pizzazz, it needs to have a little bit of entertainment value to hook the audience, to get them interested in the educational material. I also think it would help if the videos were relatively brief, if they were under 10 minutes, and if they were focused, if they were pitched at a popular audience. I don't know if YouTube is necessarily I don't know if that kind of YouTube channel is necessarily the best tool for educating someone in a very comprehensive way. I think it's a great tool for popular outreach, for allowing people to have a better basic understanding of principles and things like that. But if you want to have a really thorough, comprehensive understanding of a complex issue, then you're talking more about either actually having to go to university and get educated about that stuff formally, or at the very least watching those open courseware videos that you mentioned in your question. The Fluke Man. Steve, what do you think makes many people feel the need to act like pretentious hipsters relating to media? For example, someone watches Blade Runner and finds it really boring and slow, yet they research its deeper meaning and use this info to pretend to be a cultured cinephile and show off their vast knowledge and understanding of something which is just a movie, even though they personally don't enjoy the movie. Why pretend to understand something in order to impress someone? And who are they impressing? Guys who overthink and obsess over something that in reality doesn't matter one bit? I part from you on one point, and that is the point that it doesn't matter. Art does matter to a lot of people. It might not matter in the immediate sense that it doesn't provide you with food, shelter, water, or clothing. Like you can live and exist without art. It's not essential, and in that sense, it's not important. But art is very important to a lot of people. Art enriches people's lives. Art gives us things to think about. Art tells us things about other people, about ourselves as individuals and as a species and as cultures that other things just can't tell us. So I would balk at the suggestion that, well, it's just a movie, it's not important. In a certain sense, it is. In a certain sense, it is important. But yeah, other than that, I completely agree with you. I think it's a little ridiculous to a phenomenon that I've noticed that is quite prevalent and that I've even fallen victim to myself from time to time is when you realize you haven't seen a movie that everyone else in the room has seen, so you just say that you saw it. I've done that once or twice. But I agree with you that I think there's a certain aspect of the pretentious kind of cinephile culture, the hipster cinephile culture, the hipster culture in general, that is just ridiculous. I mean, it's one thing to love art and to appreciate art and to crave it and to want to understand it and talk about it, but it's another thing to act as though your particular understanding of a piece of art makes you better than someone else, or makes you necessarily smarter or more insightful than someone else. That's ridiculous. That's something that is to be laughed at, I think, more than anything else. Life Until Love. Hey Steve, I watch a fair amount of atheist and science channels and have developed ones I like, including you obviously. However, I'm not sure what to do when I see a video from one of these YouTubers for the first time on feminism or a related topic. I'm nervous about watching the video because I don't know if they're going to be supportive or massively anti-feminist. There doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground between those options on the internet. It is not that I need everyone to agree with me, but I'm afraid of having a repeat of what happened with Thunderfoot. What should I do? Should I avoid those videos and continue to watch the content they have that I know I like, or should I just watch the video and find out? Also, if I watch their video and realize they are very strongly anti-feminist, is it alright to stop watching the channel? Thanks for your time. Of course it's okay to stop watching the channel. It's okay to stop watching a YouTube channel for pretty much any reason. Let's not read too much into what it says about ourselves as people if we decide to stop watching a particular YouTube channel. It doesn't mean you're closed-minded. It doesn't mean you're afraid of being confronted with disagreeing opinions or anything. It just means that you just don't feel like watching that channel anymore. It doesn't do for you what it once did. It doesn't hold the interest for you that it once had, so you're not going to watch it anymore. It's not that big of a deal. But having said that, I also want to assure you, since you asked, that it's okay to keep watching it too. There are many, many, many YouTube channels, atheist YouTube channels, that I don't watch, that I either never watched or I watched here and there and then I stopped watching. Often the reason I stopped watching was because they started publishing virulently anti-feminist content, which I not only disagreed with but found ugly and offensive. And I stopped watching them for that reason. And I don't watch them to this day. And I don't feel bad about that. And I don't feel like I'm denying myself something or I'm doing something I'm not supposed to do. I decided not to watch them. But if you want to watch their videos that are on topics that you can agree with them on, if you still find value in some of their output and not other parts of it, then that's fine too. It doesn't have to be an absolute this or that. You can watch the content that they make that you do find interesting or you do find appealing, and you can ignore the rest. That's the option that you have. And if that's what you choose to do, that's fine. Furo, I know you're big into cinematography, and I realize that you may have had this discussion before, but for the past few days, I've grown to have a certain resentment for actors. As a writer yourself, I assume you know the difficulties of constructing, editing, and even pitching an idea to possible producers. However, when the movie's released and is successful, the vast majority of attention is paid to the actors. Of course, movie enthusiasts, though, keep the writer in mind, but for the most part, actors are on the top. Do you agree, disagree, or qualify with this perspective? I sympathize with that perspective as a writer, but I'm not resentful of actors because I also respect actors as artists. Now, I think we can quibble of, well, yeah, but the writer's more important because the writer makes it all up. I think that's a fun conversation to have, but ultimately I don't think it's very productive because I don't think a movie can exist without everybody working together. Yes, of course you need the writer to write the script, to invent the story. You need the director to make the movie, to make sure it has a unified vision, to make sure it's saying something and it's coherent. You need the director of photography. You need the set designer and the costume designer and all the other folks behind the scenes. You need the editor. You need the composer. And of course you need the actors. You need the people in front of the camera to actually tell the story. And acting, I think, is an art and is a craft worthy of respect. And I think actors deserve to be celebrated for their talent when they demonstrate it. So I don't really have a huge problem with it. And actually I think there are certain things that writers and actors can learn from each other. In some respects, what actors do and what writers do is the same thing. They're both trying to tell stories. And when you are writing a scene or when you are acting a scene, that concept of motivation is incredibly important. Whether you are a writer or you are an actor, the idea of why am I doing this? Or why is this character doing this? And what would this character do in this situation? That is a crucial question to ask yourself when you're writing or when you're playing a scene as an actor. So I think they can learn from each other. And I don't think they necessarily need to be in competition or resentful of one another. Ali Mulcahy, Steve, please help me. I'm an English 15-year-old who is really struggling to understand America. Please could you explain why Donald Trump is so popular? Why Kim Davis only served 5 days in prison? Why abortion is such a horrific thing when it isn't actually the death of a sentient being and therefore not murder? Why is there so much pro-gun ownership? And why, oh why, is the fact that 1/4 of all black people in your great country will spend a night in jail? I believe America can be great. I don't know if great again is the right phrase, but I believe America can solve some very simple problems and be a lot better socially and politically. Speaking of folks from outside the U.S. having a firmer grasp on our politics than many of us do, yes, from the mouths of European teenagers. Ali, I don't know. If I could answer very simply and succinctly why Donald Trump is popular, I would identify the problem and do whatever I could to fix it. I don't think it's very simple. I think Trump does what many politicians do, what politicians have always done. He plays to the cheap seats, so to speak. He demagogues and fearmongers and stirs up resentment against the other. And then he says, but I can fix it, or I will stand up for you. He does that sort of thing. And to a lot of people, it works. One of our two major political parties is basically run by Christian conservatives, and that has a very powerful influence on our political discourse, especially when you get out into the wider popular culture. Why are 1/4 of all black people going to spend a night in jail? Because we're a white supremacist country. There's no other way to say that. That doesn't mean that all of us are racists in our hearts. It doesn't mean that all of us have animus toward black folks. All white folks are trying to hold black people down, but I don't see how you can say that this is not still a white supremacist culture. By default. Not necessarily by intention, but just by default. White is the default. White supremacy is the default in our culture. And that sucks. It sucks for all of us. It sucks for white folks, and it especially sucks for people of color. But those are just very broad identifications of very complex, long-standing social problems. And again, if I knew how to fix them, or I knew better ways, more helpful ways of describing them, I probably would not be on YouTube. Joe McClory. Hi, Steve. You have mentioned gun control and America's seeming inability to address gun violence in any meaningful way in more than a few videos. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind going into details about what you would personally like to see passed. Both your best case, if you could get any laws passed, and the least you think could make a difference if a compromise could be made. There are a couple of ideas that have been proposed here and there in the past that I think are fantastic and that don't get mentioned as often as other proposed gun control measures, because they don't really involve directly banning things. I'm all for banning assault weapons. I'm all for banning high-capacity magazines. I think that's great. I would love to see that happen. But I would rather see something like, I would love to see an ongoing, well-funded federal gun buyback program, where if you want to get rid of your guns, you can basically sell them to the government for market value. They will buy your gun from you and then they will destroy it. I would love to see it federally mandated by law that guns, crime guns, seized guns by law enforcement have to be destroyed after they are no longer needed as evidence. I think that would be fantastic. I would love to see a national gun registry, a federal database that every gun owner has to enter, and every single gun that they own has to be in that database. I think that's just, that to me is common sense. And the fact that there is so much opposition to that, to me, is a sign of how horrible the problem is in the United States, when people are so paranoid and so filled with this anti-government fantasy of theirs that they will resist even registering their firearm. You have to register your car. You have to have a license to drive your car. You have to have a registration to drive your car. The government knows where all the cars are and who owns all the cars. And nobody's afraid that the government's going to come and take their car. But yeah, things that are designed to make it more difficult to have a gun and things that are designed to reduce the overall number of guns. Those to me are the reforms that I would really like to see focused on. Banning particular guns is great. I have no problem with that at all, but I don't know how much of an effect long-term that would have on the problem. I think the main problem is that there are just too many guns in the United States, and it is too easy for too many people to have them. And Thor agrees. Thank you, Thor. I always knew you were always the most sensible of the Norse gods to me. And the Avengers. Anyway, Thor says it's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Kevin Logan, do you know the way to San Jose? Nope. I guess I could Google map it or something. Why am I going to San Jose? Ariel Rosenthal, I know it's a song. Ariel Rosenthal, hi Steve. Do you see MRAs as taking away from actual men's rights issues? For example, trans men's rights and prejudice against male homemakers and stay-at-home dads, seeing as they have already claimed the name men's rights activists? Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most revolting things about the men's rights movement is that it not only doesn't care about actual issues that could affect men, but it's counterproductive against those. It actually harms efforts to move forward on those issues. So yeah, it's absolutely right. And they call themselves men's rights activists when they are not activists. Harassing feminists on the internet does not make you an activist. The Flaming Vault, Steve, what is the worst? To go after a friend's girlfriend, to cheat on your boyfriend, or to refer to your boyfriend as just a friend? Out of all the years of Toby Benson shit, the latest episode of Steven Stuffy kind of hit me hard when he called Jack his friend. From personal experience, that hurts even if it is kind of true. Yeah, that might be the worst, but they're all kind of the same thing, aren't they? They're all a betrayal. I mean, whether you cheat on someone or whether you go after someone else's partner or whether you just sort of deny your relationship to someone else, it's all kind of an emotional betrayal, isn't it? Terry James, are there any books or movies you love that you also find have problematic elements, like the portrayal of women or minorities? Oh, there are tons. There are so many. There's a Tumblr site called Your Fave is Problematic. And I've said this before, I'm sure. You could just put everything on there. Every book, every movie. There's no such thing as a perfect book or a perfect movie. Not the least because everybody's perspective is different. What I find troubling, you might find completely okay. But yeah, there are tons of examples of that. And I just can't think of any right now because I've only had one cup of coffee and I'm shooting this in the morning. Germ-free cat lightning round question. Does the noise from outside bug you? I've never noticed as many noises off in previous videos. Even your cat joined in. Is this because you've changed the time you record them or have more assholes moved into your neighborhood? No, it's just normal outside noise. I guess maybe some of it is the time of day. A portion of last week's video was shot in the morning and this video is also being shot in the morning. Typically I try to shoot the You Had to Ask videos at night, so maybe there's a little less noise at night. And for these videos, it doesn't bother me that much. For videos like 5 Stupid Things, where I'm not supposed to be in my living room, it bothers me when you can hear trucks roaring by out the window. But for these, it's just sort of, it's an annoyance, but it's not a huge deal. I would like to not have it, of course. Don57, are you a fan of the Muppets? And if so, have you watched the first 2 episodes of the new Muppet Show? I have. Actually, by this point, I've watched the first 3 episodes of the new Muppet Show, and I love it. I love the Muppets in general, and I really, really like the new Muppet Show. It's really funny. I'm very happy about it so far. Appointment Television. Radical Bacon, will you enumerate the ways in which you are a hick and or a redneck? Sure, well, I was raised in a town with a population of 400. My graduating high school class was, I don't know, maybe 50 people, 60 people, something like that. I have attended a dirt track race. I do pronounce certain words with kind of a rural pronunciation. My father uses the word knowed as the past tense for know instead of known, and occasionally in casual speech I will do it too, and I'll also do it as a joke. But yeah, there are many ways in which I might qualify as a hick or a redneck. And also, Radical Bacon, happy birthday. Jerry Bartoli, hey Steve, lightning round. Yes. Tom or Jerry? Tom, but I'm not a huge Tom and Jerry fan in general. Kirk or Picard? That is super tough, but I would have to go with Kirk. Simon or Garfunkel? Simon. Beatles or Stones? Again, very tough, but Stones. And Got That Funk? Figs. Your thoughts? I've never had a proper fig. I don't recall ever having a proper fig, but if you can smash them into a paste and put them between some cake, in other words, a Newton, a fig Newton, if you will, then I am a huge fan of that. The fig Newton is one of mankind's most splendid creations, to my way of thinking. But I've never had a proper fig, so I guess I can't really give an informed opinion on that question. That's it for the lightning round, everybody. It's time for the shout out. And the shout out this week is one that I've been meaning to give for a couple weeks. It's a heavyweight this week. It's someone who does have a YouTube channel, but she also does things outside of YouTube. She's a heavyweight. She's an author. She's an intellectual and academic and just an all-around cool, interesting, fascinating, and informative person. It is Sikivu Hutchinson. She is an atheist. She is a feminist. She is someone who writes and speaks on the importance of intersectionality and diversity, both outside in the larger world and also within the atheist community itself. She is a champion of diversity within the atheist community, of lifting up and making a space and giving a voice to marginalized people within the atheist community. She has spoken very eloquently and very forcefully about the potential for the atheist movement as a means of liberation for black folks, especially for black women, traditionally who have looked to the church as their means of social liberation and their source of community. And Sikivu Hutchinson writes very powerfully about how atheism, the atheist community, could serve that same purpose. And I think that is fantastic. I think she is an incredibly powerful, eloquent, articulate voice in our community. And I would love it if more people in our atheist community, especially here on YouTube, knew who she was and gave a listen or a read to some of her thoughts, because she is fantastic. And her YouTube channel features talks that she's given and interviews that she's given, and I highly recommend it to you. Sikivu Hutchinson. Check out her YouTube channel and just check her out in general. There are some really fascinating interviews with her you can find on the internet. You can read her book. She's written 3 books. She's just terrific. So highly, highly recommend it. Check her out. I also want to recommend, as always, that you check out the Lemme Listen podcasts. These are the product of the great Jason Harding, my buddy, my pal, the creator of Opinionville here on YouTube. There are 3 Lemme Listen podcasts. There's Lemme Finish with him and Finite Atticus, which is hilarious. There is the improv comedy podcast, American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, which is like a cross between Twin Peaks and Coast to Coast AM, and it is fantastic and incredibly funny. And there is Late Seating, which Jason and I co-host together, where we talk about movies. We review important movies, classic movies, movies that have a very high profile in our culture, and we make fun of them and we summarize them and we discuss whether or not we think that these movies deserve to be considered classics or great works of cinema. It's a lot of fun to do. It's hopefully a lot of fun to listen to. Our most recent episode went up last week. It's The Last Starfighter. We do it every 2 weeks, so there will be a new episode up next week. So I invite you to listen to all of the Lemme Listen podcasts. You can find them at www.lemmelistenpodcasts.com. That's it for me, everybody. I'm out of here. As always, please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. And I will answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody.